For a long time, I wondered if 10 chickens could really bring some serious profit. On the internet, everyone tells different stories, but hardly anyone shows the real numbers. So I decided to test and calculate everything in detail. If you are thinking of getting chickens for eggs or income, this will do the trick. I will tell you without embellishment and without any unrealistic expectations. I will show you how many eggs you can realistically get from 10 chickens. And most importantly, how much money can actually be left at the end of the month. At the end of the video, you will know exactly whether this is worth it or not. How many eggs do they really carry? When I started, I thought that every chicken lays an egg every day. But the reality is a little different, and not many people say that. On average, one hen lays about 5 to 6 eggs per week. This means that you will not have 10 eggs per day from 10 hens. It is more realistic to get between 6 and 8 eggs per day. Of course, it depends on the diet, the light, and the conditions in which you keep them. In winter, production declines, but in summer it usually does better. Also, older hens lay less than younger ones. I noticed it already after a few months. That's why it's important not to calculate the maximum, but the real situation. How many eggs do you get per month? When I added it all up at the end of the month, the numbers were interesting. If you average 6 to 8 eggs a day, that adds up quickly. On a monthly basis, this is roughly between 180 and 240 eggs. Of course, not every month will be the same, but this is a realistic average. Sometimes it's more, sometimes a little less, but roughly that's it. It was important for me to have a constant, not a perfect result, because when you plan your earnings, you have to count on the average. And it is precisely this number of eggs that makes the difference in earnings later. How much money you can make, different pricing scenarios. Now let's talk about the part everyone actually cares about, and that's the money. The price of eggs can vary a lot depending on where and how you sell them. If you're selling to neighbors or locally, you might charge a lower price per egg. But if you position them as farm fresh or organic style, you can charge more. For example, I've seen people sell eggs for a basic price and others almost double that. So your income really depends on your approach, not just the chickens. If I take an average number of eggs per month, the total can look pretty decent. But this is still gross income, and we haven't talked about expenses yet. And trust me, this is where things get more realistic. Costs, the part most people ignore. A lot of people skip this part, but I think it's the most important one, because if you don't calculate your costs, you're just guessing your profit. The biggest expense is definitely the feed for the chickens. On top of that, you might have small additional costs, like maintenance. Even things like water, space, and your time should be considered. At first, I didn't pay attention to these details, and that was a mistake. Once I wrote everything down, the numbers became much clearer. The profit is not what you think until you subtract these costs. And this is exactly why many people overestimate their earnings. Net profit, the real truth. After subtracting all the expenses, I finally got the real numbers. And honestly, it was lower than what I expected in the beginning. But it was still a positive result, which is what matters. The key thing is that this is not a get-rich-quick situation. It's more like a steady, small side income if done right. If you scale up, of course, the numbers can become much bigger. But with just 10 chickens, you should keep your expectations realistic. For me, the biggest value was consistency, not huge profit. And once you understand that, Everything makes more sense. Real-life example, my personal monthly breakdown. To make this even clearer, I want to show you a real example from my own experience. Let's say I consistently get around 200 eggs per month from my chickens. Now, depending on how I sell them, the total income can change a lot. If I sell them at a lower local price, the earnings are more modest. But if I position them as high-quality, farm-fresh eggs, I can charge more. In my case, I tested both approaches just to see the difference. And what I noticed is that presentation and trust matter more than people think. When buyers see clean eggs, good packaging, and consistency, they're willing to pay extra. So it's not just about production, it's also about how you sell the product. Then, when I subtract the monthly feed costs, I get a clearer picture. Some months are better, some are a bit slower, and that's completely normal. But overall, the numbers stay within a predictable range. This helped me understand that stability is more important than chasing perfect results, because once you know your average, you can actually plan ahead, and that's when this stops being a hobby and starts feeling like a small business. Tips to increase profit without more chickens. Now here's something that made a big difference for me over time. Instead of adding more chickens right away, I focused on improving what I already have. One of the first things I changed was the way I sell my eggs. Simple things like better packaging and clear communication increased my price. I also made sure my chickens had consistent feeding and good conditions. That alone helped improve egg production without extra cost. Another important thing is building trust with repeat customers. When people know you always deliver quality, they come back again. And returning customers are much more valuable than new ones. I also started thinking about small branding, even on a local level. Something as simple as a name or a story can make your product stand out. Over time, these small improvements added up more than I expected. So instead of scaling too fast, I optimized what I already had. And honestly, that's a much safer and smarter way to grow. Because once your system works with 10 chickens, scaling becomes much easier. And you avoid making expensive mistakes in the process. Conclusion plus personal opinion. So is it actually worth it to keep 10 chickens for profit? In my opinion, it depends on your goal. If you're looking for a small extra income, then yes, it can make sense. But if you expect this to replace a full-time job, it's not enough. You would need to scale and think more like a business. For me, it's a combination of profit and personal satisfaction. You get fresh eggs and a bit of money on the side. And that's honestly a pretty good deal if you ask me. Let me know what you think. Would you try this yourself?